subject is global data privacy challenges for regulators. Maybe next 50 minutes we will spend time on this. As Ravi Kumar had said, it is a one-day workshop itself, which I try to condense it in 50 minutes. It's a tough job for me. So we will give you a 9,000 level overview along with some practical experiences. I would more of it as an experience sharing rather than knowledge sharing, because that also is very important. So in this 50 minutes, we are going to spend time on 5 specific topics. So first will be what is called as opening thoughts, which I have, and to set the thinking process. Then we will discuss about the fines imposed under GDPR. As thought leaders, I always have an top-down approach. In fact, in the GDPR, the penalties and fines come at the end. But here I will be discussing it at the top level, because we want to know, as thought leaders, we are more interested in the bottom line and the top line. So the first question, when anything is to be implemented, you ask, what is it that is in me? So that is what we are going to discuss, the second topic. The third topic we are going to talk about is standards, frameworks, regulation, certification, so many things in and around the GDPR and the privacy frameworks. We will see and get a 360-degree view of what is it that is there for privacy. Then we will come to GDPR specific overview and challenges. It will not be possible to take all the articles. Few challenges, domain-wise, we will be discussing. And we also have what is called the Personal Data Protection Bill of India. So having studied the various privacy laws in India, I have seen 2 specific USPs. That is what we call as unique selling proposition, which I want you people to think over and mull over. Tomorrow, this may become a best practice. So we are a bit proactive and see that this can be adapted internationally as well. So these are the 5 things we are going to talk about. So the opening thoughts is when we talk about privacy, confidentiality, security, there's a lot of overlaps. So to get the basics clear, the most important aspect is what is the difference between confidentiality and privacy. So privacy is always related to a natural person, whereas information about an artificial person like Oracle, it may be an artificial person. When we talk about an artificial person, the word privacy does not come into picture. So the attribute of privacy is always related to a natural person. And from an information security perspective, if I look at it, privacy is a subset of confidentiality. That is one thing which we need to keep in mind. The second thing, most important, is there is a huge conundrum or a paradox, as I call it, is between privacy versus national security. Whether privacy is important or national security is important. That is why I call it as a conundrum. So for example, if I take a simple example in the Indian scenario, okay, this is how I may use 1 or 2 examples of Indian scenario, because you will be also able to relate, because what is happening, because this sort of issues I have not seen in other geographies. So here we know privacy is a fundamental right under the Indian Constitution. So the Supreme Court debated and came out and told privacy is a fundamental right. At the same time, as a part of national security, lot of fake news is happening across the globe, all of us are aware of. So in the social media, this fake news has to be curtailed. So the government has come out and told that each social media account needs to be tracked to an individual. So now how do I track this individual? So all these social media companies, the Facebooks and the Twitters of this country went to Supreme Court and told that they want Aadhaar to be linked to these social media accounts. So in one place we are talking about privacy, on the other place we are talking about national security. So that is what I call it as the conundrum or the paradox. We need to strike a nice balance between national security versus privacy. That is a challenge of the regulators across the globe and the governments across the globe, is where do I strike a fine balance between the two. Then 2 more thoughts is there's something called personally identifiable information, which is normally known as PII. So privacy can be related to PII. Then we talk about personal data. All these things get together. We talk it as in a bundle as privacy. So now just before we go on to the next subject, let us have a poll for all of you to understand. I've got 2 questions in this poll. So the poll is now open. The first question is, which of the following statement is true with regard to privacy? And the second is about the maximum fines which is available. The poll is open now. Hope all of you are able to see. You can start your polls now. Answer these 2 questions. Time out now. In a few seconds, I'm going to stop it. I'm going to end the poll. I've got more than very good 78%, 80%. Excellent. So I'm ending the poll now for the want of time, and I will share the results. So let us see the first question. So 56 people have told that the word privacy has been used in GDPR 35 times. The very interesting aspect of GDPR is the word privacy has not been used even once. So we have to understand the framework in a bit higher aspect. All of us think GDPR is privacy. The word GDPR itself means General Data Protection. So if you scan through the entire act, you will never find the word privacy. But if you look at California CCPA, there the word itself is privacy. That is a good point. And the second point is British Airways. Only 20% of them got it right. Everybody is behind Google. 49 people have responded as Google. In fact, it is British Airways. We will see this as we go along. So these are the 2 most important take home of this session so far. Is privacy is not defined in GDPR. So we move along. So 2 things. When you look at the penalties, as I said, top-down approach, penalties as per the GDPR, as and other laws also I have seen, basically they have categorized it into 2 categories. What I call it as T1 and T2, it is a definition of GDPR. So I categorize it for easy recollection. One type of fine as per GDPR is 10 million euros or 2%. The second type of fine is 20 mio or 4% of the preceding financial year, whichever is higher. So what are the offenses under which you will be fined under type 1 and you will be fined under type 2? I have not given all the cases here. I have just highlighted a couple of them. So if you have certain obligations as a controller and a processor, if you don't fulfill the obligations under controller and processor, you will be penalized. There is something called data protection impact assessment. I'll be talking about it in the end. If you don't adhere to those data protection impact assessment guidelines, again you will be penalized. Then there is something called data protection officer. That also we will be talking as we go along. For these type of offenses, it is called type 1. The second one is called type 2, which is more severe in nature. It is like your capital punishment as per law. So there, if you violate the basic principles of data privacy, the data subject rights, if they are not able to exercise, and certain cross-border transfers, if you don't adhere to these specific articles, that article numbers also I mentioned there, also will be penalized as per the type 2 category. So type 2 is, think of an organization, like I used to work for BNP Paribas. If there is a violation, they have got presence in 169 countries or 180 countries. So if there is a violation under type 2, even though the violation has happened somewhere in Europe or some corner of the world, the entire penalty can go up to 4% of their global turnover. So we need to be very sensitive to this aspect of what is the penalty which is going to be imposed. And that will be related to the balance sheet of the earlier year, not the current year. If the breach has happened in the current calendar year or the financial year, the penalty will be imposed on the profits which you have already booked and the turnover which you have already booked. So it is always on the historical basis. This is a fine print which many people do not understand. They only talk about 4% and 2%. 4% of what, 2% of what, we need to be very clear. Now we will look at the penalties in 3 different views. So these are, I am showing you, this is from the GDPR violations only, where we have got the top 7. So if you look at the top 7 types of violations, so one is insufficient technical and organizational measures to information security. This is type 1. You have got 68 fines. Maybe to count the euros in MIO, you can do the calculation. Second is insufficient legal basis for data processing, around 114 fines. Non-compliance with general data processing principles, again type 2, 44 fines. Insufficient fulfillment of data subject rights, type 2. Insufficient fulfillment of information obligations, data breach notification, and lack of appointment of DPO, 4 fines. So this is how, there is a website. If those are interested, I will share that website in the next slide. It is there, enforcementtracker.com. If you go and look at it, you will get the multi-dimensional approach to the entire MIS. Now when we look at the countries, the maximum fine is at UK, but only 3 fines, followed by France, Italy, Germany, Austria, Sweden, Bulgaria, Spain, Netherlands, and Poland. What I put on the number on the right hand here, on the, I'll show you this number which I put, is in terms of your, just a second. Okay, this number which you are seeing at this corner is related to the, in number of terms of count, that is 7, 4, 5, and 1. Bulgaria is number 1 in terms of number of fines that way. So now, so top fines which we had seen earlier. So we proceed to that fines. Here you are able to see British Airways is the one which had the maximum penalty of 183.39. So here what happened in this case was people were booking tickets on the website of British Airways. Between the payment gateway, the customers of British Airways were taken to a rogue website of the payment gateway, and from there payments were made. So that is the reason why it is under insufficient technical and organizational measures. The second top one, as far as T1 is concerned, all of us are aware of, which is Marriott. They were fined 110 million euros. Then under category type 2, I have taken the top 3. One is Google, insufficient legal basis for data. We will see what it is as we go along. In a few slides, we will be discussing that also. Then we have got TIM, which is another telecom company, which was fined 27.8 MIO. And Austria Post is 18.0 MIO euro. So I was telling, just like we have got Fortune 500 companies, we will also have one more benchmark or yardstick, which will tell the top fines for GDPR will be another important dashboard to evaluate, and your stock prices will be related to that. In addition to GDPR, there is one more important law in USA, which is called COPPA. You will see as we go along. For COPPA non-obligation, that is also related to privacy of children. In USA, YouTube was fined 170 million. So this is just to give you a flavor of the quantum of fines which is being imposed by the regulators across the globe. So now we move to the next one. Okay, now let us look at how the privacy and compliance laws are evolving worldwide. So there is a beautiful site. If anybody wants to do a deep dive into this, the site is dlapiperdataprotection.com. So this is copyrighted to them. So they have done an analysis across the globe and found out which all part of the globe privacy is robust or heavy. So those in dark red is heavy in nature, orange is robust in nature, and moderate is light yellow, and limited is green in color. So by looking at this one map, you are able to understand what is the position of the privacy laws across the globe. So this is just to give you that European GDPR, then you have got Turkey, then you have got China, you have got South Korea, you have got Japan, Hong Kong, Taiwan, New Zealand, Australia, Philippines, India, Argentina, USA, Canada, Malaysia, Singapore, Brazil is the latest child on the block. And then the word Brexit, which we all live in day in and day out, has brought a new twist to the entire GDPR. So as per the Brexit, as per the mutual understanding, because of Brexit, this privacy law is applicable. This GDPR is applicable to UK till 30th or 31st of December this year. After that, maybe they will have their own law. If those people who have worked in this privacy domain, there was a law of UK which was called the Data Protection Act of 1997. So the same act may be now modified to meet the current guidelines. As on date, there is no visibility of GDPR existing beyond 1st January 2021. So we move on to the next one. So next we have got another poll for all of you. I'll just start the poll. Okay, almost 70% done. Maybe in a couple of seconds I will have to stop the poll for the purpose of time. I'm stopping the poll now. 77% of the people have answered. Now I will share the results. Okay, in this also people have fared very badly. So NIST should have been the right answer. We will see what it is. It is not a GDPR is a regulation. ISO 27701 is a standard. And then when we talk about the country here is Germany is the country, because of all the European Union nations, Germany has got a structure which is similar to US, is that each state within Germany can have their own laws. So this is something very interesting as far as Germany is concerned. Good. So now let us go further, move further. Okay, so this slide will give you all the clarification which is required as far as standard, framework and regulations are concerned. So standards are basically those which are used for certification. So for example, ISO 27701 is a standard. ISO 27018 is a standard. At the same time, NIST is what is a framework. And then all other GDPR, CCPA, Cloud Act, etc. are called what is called as your regulations. So we need to understand a very clear differentiation between standards, frameworks and regulation. The key difference between a standard and a framework is standards can be certified, frameworks cannot be certified. Standards can be implemented in totality, frameworks can be implemented in bits and pieces. Whereas regulations, you have to adhere to it by tooth and nail. There is no two ways about it. So we have got NIST framework is a very good framework, which is like a guidance note for all of you. And 27018 is also an interesting standard for privacy of the cloud. So if Oracle Cloud is there, you may have to look at another important aspect of 27701 and 27018. 27018 is not a certification standard. It is only a code of ethics or code of practice, I would rather call it. Whereas 27701, you can get your organization certified for 27701. However, it is a second level standard. What do I mean by second level? your organization should already be 27,001 certified. If your organization is 27,701 certified, then only you can go for 701 certification. Then I also happen to look at your website. You have got what is called as Trustee Certified Privacy, which is given by some private organization. So there are a lot of certifications which is available. Another important aspects when we are looking at this certification, we need to keep in mind what is called as Article 43 of the GDPR. As per the Article 43 of GDPR, every supervisory authority can nominate or appoint certification bodies. As on date, the number of bodies which have been certified or approved by supervisory authority is 0. Even after 2 years of GDPR in action, no body is now certified. Maybe 27701 may be adopted. That is why ISO is an early adapter. They thought and they smelt that there is very something interesting, maybe we can use it. Another interesting snippet about ISO 27701 is no standard is mapped to regulations. ISO 27701 is the only ISO standard which is mapping it to the GDPR directly. So it is my hunch that 27701 may take the backdoor entry and be valid under Article 43. We will see Cloud Act in few slides because that's also a very important act. So now you may ask me the next logical question, because 27701 was launched somewhere in October, whether any organization has got themselves accredited. So Infosys is one of the early adopters, one of the first companies in the world to go for 27701 accreditation, which Ravi was telling about me in the introduction. So I was proud to be part of this accreditation practice. That is the photograph which you see of mine there is from the boardroom of Infosys. So when I happened to go there and do this as a subject matter expert along with Bureau Veritas, who is a certification body. So people have already started thinking of 27701 accreditation. So now we will talk about, we will not talk much about NIST privacy framework. So this is a very good framework. Again, those who are in the cyber security, there is another framework of NIST, which is called cyber security framework. And as I was talking to Annapurni today morning, so there is a lot of overlap between cyber security and privacy, because a cyber security breach can lead to a privacy breach. So if you study the privacy framework and cyber security framework, and if you study any one, adapting the other one is not going to be difficult. That is what is called compatible frameworks. So both cyber security and privacy framework of NIST are both compatible frameworks which you can read. They have put it under functions, categories, subcategories, etc. Now, US laws. So one side we have got GDPR. Within GDPR, we saw the complication as far as Germany is concerned. Now we come to US. As I mentioned earlier, just like Germany has got their local state laws, most of us would be aware that the same thing is true in US as well. So you have got 20 sector or e-medium specific privacy laws, and then the most important was your CCPA, which is in limelight now. There is one more act which is called the Cloud Act, which is 180 degrees opposite to GDPR. So which mentions that this Cloud Act is very interesting as far as US is concerned. There was an interesting case of some data of Microsoft storage which was stored in Ireland, and the law enforcement agencies of US wanted to access the data which is in Ireland, which Microsoft said no, because the jurisdiction is outside. So this prompted the US government to pass this act called the Cloud Act, wherein you can enter into what is called as bilateral agreements. Just like trade agreements, you will have bilateral agreements for sharing the data across countries. So now there again, as I said, the paradox or the conundrum is now data sharing privacy versus the government. So how it is going to be implemented, time alone will tell. Finally, this law has been passed. Now US government will have to enter into agreements across multiple countries to get data from one side to another side. This was passed on March 23rd, 2018. Okay, now we go into a bit different topic that is called international certifications. So we have got what is called as an International Association of Privacy Professionals. They have got 3 certifications: CIPP, CIPM, CIPT. Maybe as a career path, as thought leaders, we should know. Why? Because I talked about what is called as a data protection officer. So now we need to have every organization processing or a controller need to have what is called as a DPO. Now, who is the guy who is going to be the DPO is a challenge. What skills, what competencies, etc. he require, what knowledge level he require, etc. is a big question. It is like the hen came first or the egg came first story. If you are going to have a DPO, whether he has competencies, whether he has skill sets, the question asked will be, how do I acquire until I have done the work? So this is a big challenge. So the baseline could be, you can look at some of the certifications like your CIPP, which is Privacy Professional, Privacy Manager, and Privacy Technologist. So we can look at this to increase your awareness base and knowledge base of your employees tomorrow when he is doing the role of a DPO. Similarly, ISACA, to which I belong, they also came recently with this certification, which is called Certified Data Privacy Solutions Engineer. So I am one of the CDPSC. So this gives you a role of DPO, how to handle it. Now the question comes is, what is the experience? This is the biggest challenge for organization to get a DPO. What is the experience required for a DPO? So I was talking with somebody else today morning in your group. What I told you should be a techno-legal ops guy. He should know technology, he should know law, he should also know operations. So data privacy officer is a very good career path for many people, especially the new generation we can think about and help out. For that purpose, this CIPP, CIPM, CIPT will be very useful. In GDPR, there is one advantage is that the DPO role can be outsourced. But now typically I have seen with my experience, people just outsource it to a legal firm or a lawyer. But he will only talk about the law aspect. You know your internal environment, you know your internal operations. So personally, if you ask me, outsourcing a DPO role may not be beneficial to the organization in the long run, because the lawyer does not know the environment in which you are operating. So this point we need to keep it in mind. Now let us look at the challenges on some of the aspects of GDPR. So we have got effectiveness. It was effective on 25th of May 2018. Data subjects. When we talk about data subject, again we only think of customer, customer, customer. A data subject can also be your employee. A data subject can also be your visitor. It may be a physical visitor or a virtual visitor to your website. So he is a data subject. Principles we will look at along. DPO we have already discussed. We will talk a few words on data. We already discussed on breaches and penalties. So I'm not going to discuss on breaches and penalties. I'm not going to discuss on DPO. And then we talk about supervisory authorities. Now we have the next poll ready for you. This is the third poll. Just a second. This is a small problem. Okay, here you have got multiple right answers regarding the GDPR statement. Which of the following is true with respect to GDPR? Okay, I'll stop it in a couple of seconds. Okay, now the three answers are correct. The only answer is not correct is residing outside European Union. I'll just share the results so that you people also can see. The option 3 is not valid. All others are valid. So we will see that how it is happening in the next few slides. So this is the scope summary, which all of you should be aware of, where GDPR is applicable, where it is not applicable. So if the enterprise is within the European Union, GDPR applies. If the data subject resides in the European Union, it is applicable. Is the data subject currently traveling in EU and is he using any offering goods and services, even going and checking into a hotel? He is using services. So an Indian resident going to a European Union, checking into the hotel, his data becomes private and that needs to be protected in that country. So this is a beautiful chart. And those people who are not legal also should know this basic legal jargons. So what is GDPR? It contains 98 articles and 173 recitals. So articles means you must adhere to it, and recitals are something which clarifies the point which is mentioned in the article.
Okay.
So,
is it okay?
Please mute. Somebody is there who was not on mute. Okay, now, so to give is rules and regulations. So you have got Income Tax Act, you have got Income Tax Regulation or rules. So in different geographies, they call it in different names. I think even in US, they call it as rules and regulations. And one is the bare act. Similarly, in GDPR, we don't have act and regulations. We call it the articles and recitals. So now, all of us may be aware of this. There are basic 7 principles. So the easiest way to remember is the rainbow. You remember rainbow, you remember that there are 7 principles in GDPR. What is lawfulness, fairness and transparency. The second is purpose limitation. Third is data minimization. You should get that data which is minimum for what is required for the processing or giving that delivery of product or service. Then accuracy. Then there is something called storage limitation. How long will you store it? We will see that when we talk about right to be forgotten. Then we talk about integrity and confidentiality and accountability. So the few articles talk about these principles. So any organization which is into doing the data of customers, personal data, need to identify and protect. So this is the overarching, it is like your preamble to the constitution where you need to adhere to. So we will now go to the data subject rights. This comes under your tier 2. Maximum penalty is under tier 2, which is under exercising of data subject rights. So here we have got right to be informed, right of access, right to rectification, right to be forgotten. I do not know how many of them they know in this group that the State Bank of India logo stands for the key hole. That is why I put right of access as SBI keyhole. Now, the most complicated to be, this is storage limitation and right to be forgotten. Now, what is right to be forgotten? We'll have to spend some time on this. There is no definition, very clear-cut definition of right to be forgotten. So, different countries or different supervisory authorities have defined right to be forgotten differently. So this is going to be a big challenge. Now, all of us know we are all in the blockchain phenomenon, And in the blockchain, one of the biggest advantage of blockchain is, all of you know, it is what is called as immutability. So if a transaction is immutable, I have also seen applications doing KYC, that is your know your client. I also call it as kill your client. Okay, so much of information you ask. So I have seen an application of KYC on blockchain. So tomorrow a customer of bank A exits the bank A, and then he tells, I have got my right to be forgotten, erase all my KYC data. How it is going to happen in your blockchain environment, I don't have clues. I do not know if anybody has looked at Google 2 days back. That screenshot is not that clear. So I have put a screenshot of Google in the front landing page itself. Google has given, when do you want to delete your data? That is that one. Another important aspect, as I said, Spain, Austria and UK. I got another important problem is when I take data, I also take backups in SAN storage, LTO, wherever, whatnot. So if a customer closes his account and goes and tells, right to be forgotten, please remove my name. You might have had 30, 40, 50 LTO tapes. Will you replay all these LTO tapes and delete his data from that? I have no answer. But as long as the data is on the production server, even Oracle has it, SAP has it, that you can delete the data of the customers as long as it is on production. I have no answer, and this could be one of the biggest challenges as to delete those data which is lying on the tapes. So this is some of the thoughts I am leaving to you as far as right to be forgotten, which is a very complicated one as far as adhering to it is concerned. Then there is something called restriction of processing, right to data portability. Then you have got right to object, and you have got what is called as right to automated individual decision making. So out of this, I will talk only two. So right to data portability is a very interesting one. So all of us know about SWIFT. So those people who are working in the European Union definitely know what is called as bank account number portability, which is called IBAN. Now in India, all of us should know, because this is the world's biggest biometric database, which is 1.23 billion, where you have your data included. And now if you are already KYC compliant in Aadhaar database, you go to a bank A, you can just pick the data from your KYC mobile app through an XML and give it to the bank. The bank can just take this XML, validate the digital signature and push the data into the banking system. That is a brilliant example of right to data portability. I do not know whether Oracle is doing this. This is a good use case for data portability. The biggest challenge for data portability is standardization of both financial transaction as well as non-financial transaction. Ravi?
Yeah, we can continue for another.
Take another 10 minutes extra because we started around 11:08.
Okay.
Is it okay?
Yeah, we can go up to 11:58. Yeah.
Okay, 11. Okay, we can go up to that. We started a bit late, so I'll be in time. Okay, so that I just wanted, because it's already 11:48 now. Okay, fine. So the next interesting use case is automated individual decision making. So whether you want to allow it, you don't want to allow it. Suppose a customer is taking loan continuously, you take APIs, you take data from the credit bureaus and tell, I am giving you a free loan because your credit score is so and so high. If you talk about the McDonald's example, you're a very regular McDonald's user or Domino's Pizza. When you drive down, the new offers which are coming, etc., are all part of automated individual decision making. So this also is one of the rights of the data subject to allow it or not to allow automated processing. So then the legal basis is consent, contract, legal obligation, public interest, vital interest, and legitimate interest. We will not be able to go into all of this. Maximum I can discuss on consent because that is very important, consent and notice. are the two sides of the same coin. Maybe I will have one more poll for you people, the last poll for the day. Okay, this time all of you got it right. The supervisory authority can define whitelist and or blacklist. Sorry, it is a typo error there. The last one is right, blacklist or whitelist. Okay, so fine, we will see what it is, whitelist and blacklist. So the next point which we are going to discuss is consent, most important. So notice and consent are the two sides of the same coin. So collection notice has to be given based on the 7 principles which we have seen, and the consent of the data subject has to be taken. Implicit consent is not valid, like silence. So I have given you 2 examples. If you do not get back within 30 days, it is implied that your contact details are correct. It is not the right way of taking consent. I agree should not be pre-ticked. So in most cases you see I agree, everything is pre-ticked. That will not be taken. It will be taken as this one. Similarly, it should be freely given. Terms and conditions to be there. And in all cases, consents will not be applicable. So certain contracts, which is employee contracts, your consent will not be applicable. One of the most important challenges for thought leaders here is knowing the legal regulations of the respective countries. I remember 2 countries, of which I remember Poland as one. So most of us have the habit, or as a corporate governance of ethics and email ethics, we monitor the email of employees. So in Poland, you are allowed to monitor the email of employees, but you cannot take a disciplinary action against that employee if he violates or does something illegal or unlawful. They have to approach the labor enforcement authority with necessary proof, and the labor authority alone has the right to dismiss a person. In one of the European nations, I do not remember which country, you cannot even monitor the employee's email. So even if you take a consent as an employee joining in, I have the right to monitor your email, which is valid ab initio, because there is a law of the land which says emails cannot be monitored. So taking a consent is a very, very tricky issue. We need to keep that in mind. The local laws, specifically when it comes to the data subject of employee. Now, this is generic personal data, your name, your identifier, your location can be both physical as well as digital location. Online identifiers are also personal data. So your IP addresses, your cookies, your RFIDs or your FASTags or the driving, this one, all are classified as online identifiers. They are also classified as personal data. So personal data can be classified into 3: directly to the person, indirectly linked to the person, and those data which require specific security measures like your political opinions, religious belief, health records, biometric data, etc. Now we go to the last section, which is called the supervisory authority. So I've got a small video to play, 1.5 minutes.
Data Protection Authority, or DPA, to oversee the correct application of the GDPR. To ensure a uniform application of the new data protection rules, the GDPR established an independent EU body, the European Data Protection Board, EDPB. The EDPB is made up of the national data protection authorities of the EEA member states and the European Data Protection Supervisor. If your data protection rights have been violated, you can contact your national DPA, which is best placed to deal with your complaints. The national DPAs can impose fines on businesses of up to 20 million euros or 4% of their annual global turnover. So, what can the EDPB do for you? By clarifying the understanding of the GDPR, the EDPB makes sure that the GDPR is applied uniformly, so that everyone enjoys the same rights wherever they live. By adopting binding decisions in cross-border data protection cases, the EDPB ensures that people can get help from their national DPAs for cross-border issues. The EDPB also promotes cooperation, exchange of information, and best practices among the national DPAs. Finally, by advising the European Commission on issues related to the protection of personal data, the EDPB makes sure that any new EU legislation upholds the highest standards of data protection. Remember, your data, your rights. The EDPB is here to protect you.
Okay, so people have to understand very clearly, European Data Protection Board is different. European Data Protection Supervisor is different. So most of us are bankers. So to bring in that analogy, what Bank of International Settlements or BIS is to the bankers. Similarly, there is an organization called EDPS, which is the supervisory authority of all these 28 plus 3, 31 countries together have got what is called as EDPS, that is European Data Protection Supervisor. And whatever logo you are seeing is the logo of the individual supervisor. I could not put all the logos. So CNIL is of France, Austria, all those things are there. So every country has got a supervisory authority. They are the people who will give you what is called as the white list and the black list, which we are discussing about. So the most important aspect is every process which we take on board, we need to do what is called as a data protection impact assessment. Wherever there is a high risk to data subjects, or whether there is automated processing, or you are handling special categories of personal data like health data, biometrics data, and there is systematic monitoring of personal data, we need to do what is called as a data protection impact assessment. So the respective supervisory authority has come out with whitelist. They also come out, Belgium is the only country which has come out with a blacklist and whitelist. Germany has come out with what is called as a blacklist. For example, fitness apps and devices. A straight case of blacklist in Germany because it is having too much of private information. So if you want to look at, you will have to look at the blacklist and whitelist of respective countries. So having not done a data protection impact assessment also is liable to your type 1 or type 2 penalties. This we need to keep it in mind. Now we come to the last one, is the unique concept of India, is we have got a concept of a consent manager. So now you wear a customer's hat, you would have given 100 consent to 100 organization. You don't have a dashboard. So the Indian government, as per our PDP, is talking about a consent dashboard. So you will at the end of the day know the consents, given an aggregated view of our consent, which will be a very useful mechanism. And also what is called as a data trust score. Just like a FICO score, or you got your credit scores, or your credit bureaus are giving you your credit worthiness. Each organization in the country, depending upon the sensitivity of personal data they are handling, they will also have what is called as a credit score. Still now it is in concept stage. So hypothetically, if I tell 1 to 1000, just like your credit score or credit rating, you will also know 1 to 1000 means 900. So X organization has got a credit score of 900 is very good. X bank is having a credit score of 700. So you can also look at and rank the banks or the financial institutions based on the credit score. So this is the two unique concepts. One is a consent manager, where you can aggregate the consents across various organizations, and data trust score. These are the two different concepts which is coming in the Personal Data Protection Bill of India. Now, Ravi, I open the floor to questions.
Thank you, Shanai, okay, for the